This is a marketing communication. The conversation today is intended only to provide general information. Nothing discussed should be considered financial advice. This is RWA SegMint. This episode is brought to you by SegMint.io, offering the world's best tokenized collectibles. Hey, it's your host, Steven Schill. Today, we're having rapid fire questions with Matt Bartlett, talking about everything under the scope of Web3, crypto, and RWAs.
Hi, I'm Matt Bartlett, head of Web3 at VanEck, also CEO of SegMint. SegMint.io should be your home for tokenized collectibles, general NFT marketplace, and more. Come check us out, SegMint.io.
Can you share a story of any time that you've had a personal scam attempt against you, when you fell for it, or one that you caught in the act?
Yeah, so I've been buying NFTs for almost 8 years now. Back in 2021, there was a project that was taking off, had a little bit of FOMO, and I did get tricked into buying a copycat fake collection. I spent maybe half an ETH on trying to scoop up a bunch of these tokens, which were fakes. And so I think the lesson for any newbies is to always make sure you have the correct smart contract address before you start scooping NFTs. But it's been a while, so I've learned my lesson, but that's a common one.
So I want to compare some of the top NFT collections to crypto. If we look at CryptoPunks, they have a $782 million market cap, Bored Apes at $266 million, and Pudgy Penguins at $167 million. Now, when you take just those market caps and you compare it to some of the top cryptos, that would put CryptoPunks as the 75th biggest crypto in the world, Bored Apes at 217th biggest, and Pudgy Penguins near 227th biggest. Does this change your perspective about NFTs, knowing their comparison to some of the top cryptos?
Not really. I mean, NFTs are just different. I don't think it's a fair comparison. The main point is due to their fungibility, right, in the nature of typical cryptocurrencies to non-fungible PFPs or art or Web3 assets. So I view them more in the same group of, high-end art, like they're Indie Warhols, right? And so it's probably too early to tell which Web3 art will really stand the test of time in terms of having returns that are more like traditional famous oil paintings, right? And I think most of us right now, if you asked, would rather have the same value in liquid tokens versus something where there are just far fewer buyers. And so NFTs, the reason to buy now and even, a couple of years back, I think number one is probably status. And then tied for second, returns, and maybe the benefits you get of being a part of a community.
So back in 21, NFTs felt like they were more about art, artists, and a new way to collect. It actually felt really exciting and went around kind of parading to everyone you knew, hey, this is a new way that we're able to digitally collect something that wasn't before available, at least the very open traded markets that we were. But it's felt like there has now been a complete focus away from kind of that art to just finding where there's a well-funded team that they're going to continue to build. Maybe gaming's taken a little bit of that limelight, but do you think that this shift has happened? Why is it? Is it saturation, market confidence, or maybe just a stigma around NFTs where some artists don't want to jump into the space?
I think the bear market cleaned out many projects, right, along with their wallets. And the majority of projects ran out of capital, or they revalued their business at much lower valuations, lost vision, lost community. And so it's just very different. So what you have left are really the strongest projects. Pudgy, I think, is still probably the best example despite market cap. And they keep building. There's a vision for the future. In terms of new projects, you are starting to see some projects that are kind of using the old playbook of, 10,000 piece collections and, botting their Discord, etc. But I think the more veteran degens out there are quick to call that out. And so just like how most collectors today, I think, want utility or would prefer utility over just more art, a saturation of gen art, whatever it is. They also want projects that have real backing, real teams, maybe better business acumen. And so it doesn't mean that they won't fail, but there were some lessons learned from the past few years. And I think maybe the more savvy NFT collectors are applying them to today's projects.
And so sticking with that train of 2021, there was a couple of massive things that happened at the time. Bitcoin hit $1 trillion market cap for the first time. Beeple's $69 million NFT sale shook the entire world and really kind of brought NFTs into a mainstream light. El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. Elon Musk was very prominent in Dogecoin flying to all-time highs. And DAOs also went mainstream, and there was this Constitution DAO who raised $40 million to try and buy a copy of the U.S. Constitution. All massive, massive headlines. Do you remember any of those more than another from back then?
Yeah, I remember all of them. They were all interesting. I think the one that stands out is still Beeple's sale. And I mean, in a way, that might have marked the top of the market looking back, right? In terms of how they feel today, it might as well be a lifetime ago, right? I mean, because not only have NFTs fallen, but it's going to take a great deal of work to even get back to that type of sort of energy, euphoric vibes that drove big sales like that. So yeah, that's probably the one that stands out the most.
Imagine 10 years from now, what role will blockchain technology play in collectibles for everything in the world? Is everything going to run on it? Do you think everything connects to a blockchain? Is it something that ends up eating the world?
I just think that there's a lot of opportunity to get the incredible amount of value that's maybe being hoarded. It's in closets. It's not seen daylight in a long time out into the open. And when those collectors and those sellers realize the benefits of having something that's tokenized, where they could always get an offer on it 24/7. If they need to get instant liquidity, they could get it. Those benefits might outweigh, using Web2 platforms, popular auction sites, right? I think once they realize that they could still have custody of it, sell things on their terms, the authentication is there in some cases if you're using the right technology, and the trustless transactions will make a pretty big difference going forward. But I think it's going to take a long time to get there.
So we look at collecting, staying on that same trend. What do you think the future is going to look like when Rarity and Provenance are instantly verifiable? Because now you can see something if it's got a tag of, it's a 1 of 1, but even then for certain sports cards, it's okay if it's a 1 of 1 of this card, and there's 16 variants of that, and so there's an additional 16 1 of 1. But with the way the data is being made extraordinarily available within blockchain, how do you think things get impacted with the instant verifiability that you can find now?
I think it's going to help the collector. I think you and I were speaking about this before. A great example is Caitlin Clark. I was interested in maybe buying some of her rookie cards, and as I started going through the different cards, there's one, I'm just making this up, it's the gold edition, it's the platinum edition, it's signed, it's got a patch. It's like, as a collector, I don't know which one is the most collectible card, right? And so I think by having that data on the blockchain, you could see all the transactions, all the history in one spot. That could be really helpful for the collector to narrow down which is the one that really has the most demand, and maybe what are the ones that are more undervalued over others, right? So I think there's some advantages that we could see with that going forward.
So when you say the word NFT, there's a lot of people that have just a fit about it. And I have somebody that I play League of Legends with, and he says, I watch some of your streams or videos, and every time you bring up NFT, I'm like, oh, you can't say that. People just think it's bad. And there's all this negativity around it. But what's the biggest misconception people have about blockchain marketplaces? Because we're not talking about the NFTs, but when we say blockchain marketplaces, what do you think a big misconception is due to all the negativity around NFTs?
I think people get more hung up on the term of NFT than what the actual offering is. If you had someone who was buying gaming skins on a marketplace and it never said anything about blockchain, and they were able to buy that skin and then use that skin across different games because it's interoperable, I don't think you'd ever hear a complaint. But I think a lot of especially in the gaming community, folks have gotten hung up on NFT and non-fungible token, and really the NFT is just the wrapper. It's the delivery mechanism for the item, right? Which really gives you true ownership versus keeping something in a walled garden, closed system that you can never really sell, or at least you couldn't sell in sort of a legal way, right? So I think that's one way to look at it.
So we've talked a little bit about what the future looks like. We're also living some experiences right now. But if you could speak directly to traditional collectors, no matter what they're collecting, what would you tell them about the future of their passion? And this is in reference to the fact that the blockchain is offering different components to it and things are getting much more digital?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things. We're going to see the Web3 crowd and sort of, degen digital asset collector merge with the traditional collector at some point where, right now as an NFT collector, for me, it's sort of easy to make that transition to buying physical collectibles versus digital collectibles. The person coming from the traditional side of things may not see the benefit just yet, but when they realize that, again, the NFT is just the wrapper and provides, redeemable access or ownership to those collectibles, and maybe it's items that they would have never had exposure to before, I think they might come around. There's also like the market effect. Where do most traditional collectors go? Maybe they go to trade shows. Maybe they go to a local TCG store. Well, it's like anything. I mean, you could probably find the collectible you want on eBay right now versus going to a storefront, right? You're going to have the same sort of opportunity by looking at, new, exciting, innovative Web3 marketplaces that are helping collectors who maybe have items you don't have to bring those to the market. Maybe they're tokenized, but who cares? You could still get it, and that might be interesting.
When we're looking at social media platforms across the realm of the world, for whatever reason, X seems to be the home for collectibles, Web3, and people finding a passion together. Not to say other platforms don't, but it does feel like X is at a spot where it's really captured a lot of mindshare, and you have reactions in real time to almost everything. So how do you think X impacts everything that's going on within Web3 right now with the fact that it is real-time updates 24/7?
Well, I mean, it's called crypto Twitter for a reason. I mean, you could find collectibles on Facebook and Instagram, but it's a different crowd, right? And maybe that's the crowd that's more on the traditional side. They want to use Facebook Marketplace and meet people in a Walmart parking lot to do a transaction. That's not what most of us want to do. So, yeah, I think crypto Twitter or X.com owns the tokenized collectible conversation right now.
Are you in Web3 because blockchain will change the world, or because it's the only place where you can build something that might actually last forever?
I've yet to find anything in Web3 that is likely to last forever at this point. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm in Web3 because it's interesting, and I like to think about new business ideas. And of course, there's a lot of businesses that work well in Web2 that could work really well in Web3, and it's interesting to see some of those models come to life, and maybe just the little tweaks and benefits that you get from moving to Web3, or maybe it's something that's more decentralized. But yeah, I don't know. There's it's like you're at the beginning of the internet, right? It's like going back in time and just how the internet, how Web2 changed Web1, Web3 changed in Web2, right? It's very similar to that.
What's a moment this week that made you think, yeah, we're really building the future?
So this week I had a chance to test out our fishing game that we're going to have launched in the next couple weeks. And not to oversell it, it's very fun. And I could see it being the future of commerce, where you have this cashback incentive like gamification aspect to a everyday consumer website where people are motivated to come back for more. They're enjoying the purchase experience. It's not so transactional. It just adds a bit of fun. So I think seeing more of that. So I think it's like, this is why people have liked the gotcha machines and vending machines and other mechanisms that are similar to this, and why they're sort of gaining some ground and certainly getting people's attention across Web3 and hopefully beyond Web3.
If someone's brand new to NFTs and RWAs, because if you jump into NFTs, there's a lot of conversation around RWAs and them being tokenized, what's one of the first things that you should understand first?
So I like to start with the real world asset part of the equation. And I think it's just much easier for people to wrap their heads around intrinsic value. And that begins with understanding whether the token represents something physically redeemable, right? So can you actually take possession of the item? If it's yes, then maybe it's worth spending some time learning about the collectible and evaluating its value as a real world item. If it's not, if it's a vague reference to something or entirely synthetic, I've found in my sort of 8 years in Web3 that it's probably a derivative with little to no long-term value. And so once that's clear, you could dig into the NFT mechanics. You know, if it's a digitally native token, ask, does it do something? Does it unlock access, utility, give you some sort of meaningful community benefit or participation? If not, then it's really just a JPEG with a ledger entry.
What's a physical collectible that you own that you don't think you'd ever sell, even if it went completely parabolic?
I actually got it within the last 6 months, and that's probably my first sketch card, the one that I had signed and doodled by Claire Altman. It's not just a cool card. It has a story to it. It's been featured, on social a few times. I've really actually tried to pump the lore of the card, and I enjoy owning it. On the digital side, you didn't ask, but on the digital side, I'd say my little Pudgy, which I use as my PFP. It's part of my brand. I'm not saying I'll never sell it, but at this stage in my career and with what we're building around collectibles and identity, it probably would need to be 100x offered before I'd seriously consider letting it go.
With the questions around tokenizing things as a whole, a lot of people would just say, well, why not just sell it on eBay? How do you respond to skeptics saying, yeah, tokenizing is stupid?
I hear this a lot, and sure, eBay works for most people, but the reality is that maybe three things. First, fees are brutal, sometimes around 15%, which, yes, is less than a traditional auction house, but still way too much or too high for just listing an item on sort of this whiteboard marketplace. The collector base, though, is also different. Web3, I think, unlocks a new audience. People who understand digital ownership, appreciate transparency, and maybe often value lower fees, right? So better custody and on-chain provenance are just a couple of the additional benefits you might get. And then really experience and innovation. The tokenization enables features like embedded royalties. You could have fractionalized access or gamified redemption. You just can't do that on eBay as it stands today. So it's not really about replacing eBay. It's about building for the next gen collector that wants more than just a static listing and a shipping label.
And is there anything that you've changed your mind about in crypto this year, from thinking, hey, this is going to work, hey, this isn't going to work, this is the future, this isn't the future, anything encompassing the entire industry?
Well, I used to believe that onboarding Web 2 or retail users would come from two distinct strategies, where you have, one for crypto natives and then one for the masses. But I've changed my mind. What I've learned is that it's not really a binary split. Retail just isn't fully ready. And frankly, neither is the space. Teams that have claimed to have cracked the mass adoption issue with perfect onboarding flows really are still struggling. The better approach, I think, is to keep building for Web3 natives while borrowing the best onboarding practices from Web 2 as they emerge. And it's going to take longer than we hoped, but we have to be honest about it. But the compounding progress comes from solving real pain points, not just chasing shortcuts.
The next generation of collectors doesn't care about owning things, and that's something that we've talked about a lot on these, trying to figure out, all right, ownership matters. People don't own a house. They own these collectibles, realizing with video games and all the stuff around there. But if they don't care about owning things, and if we find that the new generation cares more about participating in culture more so, how can you design for that?
Well, I actually argue ownership still matters a lot. It's just evolved. Today's collectors want both the digital flex and the physical shelf candy. So it's not this either or. It's own it, show it, maybe vault it, and definitely brag about it in your group chat. So we're designing for people who want to participate in culture and maybe leave behind a very confusing estate plan filled with tokenized cards, sneakers, and other items.
Now, if you go to a sporting event and you see somebody else that's wearing the same favorite team as yours, you feel like you have kind of an instant bond. But for collecting, is there any better feeling than finding someone who collects things that are niche that you also collect?
Yeah, honestly, it's up there with true love and finding a mint condition grail at a garage sale. When somebody actually knows why you're upset with a 90s promo misprint, or in my case, graded early video games, it's soulmate material, where in your weird little corner of the internet, it just got a +1.
If collectors care about story, ownership, and access being a bigger thing within this digital age, why are we still listing grails and very high-end collectibles on websites that feel like Craigslist?
Yeah, I mean, great point. We're out here tokenizing, in our minds, museum-grade collectibles and showcasing them next to blurry iPhone photos of used blenders. So yeah, I think collectors deserve better. Platforms feel more like curated galleries than online flea markets. That would be ideal, where the grails have stories and they deserve a stage, not just sort of a sketchy sidebar ad.
Is the future of collecting about stuff or status?
Trick question. It's both. The stuff is the vehicle, but the status is the fuel. And whether it's a grail card or a first edition vinyl or a flex-worthy NFT, as collectors, I don't think we're just acquiring things. We're really curating identity. And so the future isn't just about what you own. It's more about what owning it says about you. So in a way, clout becomes the new casing, right? We're especially in the digital era where social capital and recognition, cultural relevance is becoming just as important. So, and maybe if not more so than the physical presentation. So instead of a collectible being valuable because it's literally encased in plastic, it's valuable because it carries prestige, a story that maybe people can recognize and even respect online.
So you're somebody that collects digitally and physically. So what do you trust more, on-chain provenance or certificates of authenticity?
I mean, one lives on a decentralized ledger. The other lives in a drawer next to expired Bed Bath & Beyond coupons. Give me the one that can't be forged with a fancy printer. And instead, I'll take the one with on-chain provenance that doesn't smudge, fade, or get lost during a move.
So not to dox you or anything, but how do you think others would react to seeing what you have in your crypto wallet?
No, totally fair. First, I think they might feel sorry for me. You know, I've been collecting a long time. I've rode down the cycles hard, like many of us in Web3. But, you know, if you look closer, those relics probably tell a story. They're not just assets. They're what I would think of as more proof of experience. Scars and all. My wallet's really a digital scrapbook of the highs, the rugs, the gems. And in Web3, that sort of battle-tested history, it's maybe one of the most valuable parts of the collection.
This is marketing communication. The information contained in this document is intended only to provide general information. It shall not be construed as promotion of a specific product, nor as legal or tax advice. SegMint assumes no liability with regards to any decision taken on the basis of this information. Information contained herein is current as of the publication date and subject to change. Certain statements contained herein may constitute projections, forecasts, and other forward-looking statements which do not reflect actual results. Information provided by third-party sources is believed to be reliable and have not been independently verified for accuracy or completeness and cannot be guaranteed. SegMint content may link to third-party content for convenience purposes, and this does not represent adoption, endorsement, approval, or verification of such content by SegMint. All information is based on historic data and does not predict future developments. Using SegMint is subject to risk, including the possible loss of access to your digital assets, money, NFTs, and information. Digital assets involve a high degree of risk. If you buy a digital asset or NFT, you may not be able to sell it, and if you sell it, you might not get your purchase price back anymore. It is possible to lose the entire money paid for minting, buying, and fragmenting digital assets and/or NFTs. No part of this material may be reproduced in any form or referred to in any other publication without express written permission of SegMint.